In the village of Osserendale, the sun rose every day over the amber earth and verdant-eyed trees. Here, two neighbours lived opposite each other. One was a happy couple, Jaxon and Elara, always smiling and helping each other. They had two cheerful children who ran around the yard, filling the air with their laughter. Across the street lived Mira, a single woman of the same age. She also had two children, but her life was very different. Mira had dropped out of school in senior primary after failing repeatedly. Irritable and rebellious, she was a constant source of trouble for her parents. Her life took a turn for the worse when she became pregnant for the second time with her aunt's husband. Furious and disgraced, her father disowned her. Mira ran away with her aunt's husband, who initially promised her the world. He built her a small 2-room house and promised to build her a bigger one, but eventually returned to his wife, leaving Mira to fend for herself and her children. Mira watched Jaxon and Elara every day from her window. She saw them laugh together, share meals, and walk hand in hand through the village with their children. This sight made her heart heavy with jealousy. Why did they get to be so happy while she was alone? She couldn't stop thinking about them. The more she watched, the more obsessed she became with their lives. Mira's envy grew stronger, especially towards Elara. Every time she saw Elara with her family, it felt like a knife twisting in her heart. Mira wanted what Elara had: a loving partner, a happy home, and a well-off husband who would provide for his family. The green-eyed monster of jealousy consumed her, turning her thoughts dark and restless. Jaxon and Elara had just moved to Serendale, and they were like a bright new star no one had seen before. Their lives seemed perfect. They had a beautiful house, a son, a daughter, and a nice family car. They were one of the well-off families in the village and seemed to lack nothing. Most married women in Serendale didn't walk hand in hand with their husbands or sit and chat with them in public. Usually women would do chores, go to the market to buy the provisions, and take care of the house, while husbands would go to work. But Jaxon and Elara were different. Every morning, their whole family would get into their car, they would take their two children to a private school, and Elara would drop Jaxon at his workplace. While most children in the village walked to school barefoot, not because they didn't have shoes, but because it was common, Jaxon and Elara's children always wore neat uniforms and polished shoes. Elara wasn't like other women who stayed at home. She was a successful tailor in town, with a big, thriving clothing shop that she was extending into a clothing factory. Elara was a very friendly woman, yet there was something mysterious about her. She would greet her neighbours with a warm smile, but the conversation would end there. Her children played together in their yard, never leaving their house to join the other kids on the street. Everyone in the village wondered about this unusual family, but most eventually let it go. Everyone except Mira. She was eager to learn more about them. A few days after they moved in, Mira decided to visit their house. She hoped to make friends with Elara. When she knocked on the door, Elara greeted her kindly and introduced herself, her husband Jaxon and their two children. But the introductions happened at the doorstep. Elara didn't invite Mira inside to chat. This cold reception made Mira very upset. As she walked back, her mind churned with anger and hurt. Instead of going home, she headed to another neighbour's house and started venting her frustrations. "I went to welcome her, but she is so rude." Mira refused. "She didn't even let me in for a cup of tea." Her neighbour tried to brush off Mira's complaints, changing the topic, but Mira's mind was fixated on Elara. Whenever Mira was off from her job as a cashier, she would stand by her window and watch the new family. She saw them leave in the morning and come back in the evening. She watched every little thing that happened in their house. When they returned from work, she saw Jaxon open the car door for Elara and help carry groceries from the trunk. Each time she saw this, Mira felt a sharp sting of envy. Inside her small 2-room house, Mira would walk back and forth with her hands on her waist, her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about Elara and Jaxon's perfect life. The more she watched, the more jealous she became. The sight of their happiness made her feel even more alone and restless. She wanted what they had, and it ate at her every single day. As Mira continued to watch her neighbors, she saw Elara's car leaving the house in a rush, which was the first time Jaxon and Elara were apart. Sensing an opportunity, Mira hurried over to their house. She found Jaxon alone, and he invited her into their living room. After greeting him, Mira told Jaxon a sob story about not having food and wanting to borrow some sugar to make tea for supper. Jaxon, feeling sorry for her, went into the kitchen and poured some sugar into a cup. While he was gone, Mira looked around the living room, marveling at how posh and well decorated it was. It felt like she was in a house from the suburbs, not their small village. When Jaxon returned with a cup of sugar, Mira thanked him. "Thank your wife for me too," she said. "I don't see her around with the kids. Is she sleeping already?" "No," Jaxon replied. "She went to her mother's village. Her mother is sick, and please don't worry about returning the sugar." As Jaxon walked Mira out, she left the house feeling oddly happy. She couldn't help but giggle at the thought of how kind Jaxon was to her. A smile spread across her face as she made her way back home. The following day, Mira watched from her window as Jaxon watered his front garden. She noticed the car was still gone. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Mira saw her chance. She walked over to Jaxon's house again, first handing him the cup he had given her sugar in, and then revealing a container of food she had hidden behind her back. "I thought I should cook you lunch since your wife isn't here." "You must be starving," Mira said with a smile. Jaxon, looking surprised, replied, "My wife cooked enough for the whole weekend. Even if she didn't, I can cook for myself." "You are a man. You shouldn't be eating leftovers or cooking for yourself. A man deserves respect," Mira insisted. "Please just sit down and taste what I made for you." "I thought you said you had no food yesterday. Besides, I can't eat right now. I'm already full," Jaxon said. But Mira was persistent. She took a small bite of the food with her own hand, trying to feed it to him. Just then, a bell rang from the driveway. Elara's children ran out of the car, rushing towards the house to find their dad, who had returned. Jaxon, with a wide smile, went to greet his family. Mira, who had followed Jaxon out of the house, stood there watching the joyful reunion. Elara briefly greeted Mira, her attention on her children and husband. They all walked inside, laughing and talking about their trip. Elara took a quick glance back and was surprised to see Mira still standing there, frozen and out of place. Inside, Elara noticed a container on the coffee table filled with rice. "Darling, whose container is this?" she asked. Jaxon explained, "It's Mira's. She came by to borrow sugar and brought this food today." Elara's face clouded with concern. A woman they had met only once was now bringing food for her husband. She didn't like it at all, but she had more pressing issues to worry about: her sick mother. Still, the incident left a lingering unease in her heart. The next morning, Elara took the container of rice and threw it in the bin before leaving for work. Mira saw this through her window, standing quietly as Elara drove away with her family. Another weekend came, and just like before, Elara left with her kids, leaving Jaxon alone. In the evening, Mira walked over to Jaxon's house and knocked on the door. When Jaxon opened it, he was stunned. "Oh, wow, you look," he stammered, unable to finish his sentence. Mira looked different, glowing and dressed in a way he had never seen before. Jaxon was speechless, struggling to find words, swallowing hard as if he were out of breath. "Are you not going to let me in?" Mira said with a smile, grabbing Jaxon's hand and leading him inside. Jaxon followed her, feeling a strange mix of emotions as she led him into one of the bedrooms. The following morning, they woke up together. Jaxon, still in awe of Mira, just stared at her, smiling. "I feel like I'm falling in love with you. I've never felt this way about anyone before," Jaxon said, looking helpless as he leaned on Mira. She smiled back at him as she got up to leave. "Please, when will I see you again? Let me have your number at least," Jaxon pleaded, taking out his phone as he walked Mira to the door. Mira gave him a knowing smile and left, leaving Jaxon standing there, his heart and mind tangled in a web of new and confusing feelings. Jaxon couldn't wait for the weekend to arrive. Each day seemed to drag on forever. As the sun set after work, he found himself pretending to tend the garden just for a chance to call Mira and ask her to come out of her yard. "Please, I miss you. Can you come out and clean your yard?" Jaxon would say. Mira would oblige, stepping out in a short dress, holding a broom and sweeping the yard at sunset. Her presence made Jaxon's heart race. "You love your garden these days," remarked Elara one evening, walking toward him. "You've been tending to it since Monday and now it's Thursday and you're still at it." Caught off guard, Jaxon quickly pretended to be busy, but he couldn't hide his nervous glance at Mira. Elara handed him a glass of water, and as she turned to leave, she noticed Mira sweeping. Elara waved at Mira and told Jaxon to come inside. "Did you see how Mira was acting?" Elara asked. "No, I didn't even notice her. Where was she?" Jaxon lied. Elara wondered if he didn't see anything. "Let's just forget about it," she said. Meanwhile, Mira went back to her yard, a smile playing on her lips. When Friday evening arrived, Mira found a message on her phone. "She's gone. Please come over." Excited, she hurried home after work to prepare for her visit. When she arrived, Jaxon was already at the door. "What took you so long? I couldn't wait to be with you." "This week felt like a year," Jaxon said eagerly. "Wait, what's the rush?" "I need to ask you something, my love," Mira replied. "Whatever you want, just say the word," Jaxon said, his eyes filled with hopeless love. Mira explained she needed money to buy school uniforms for her children and some clothes for herself. Jaxon assured her it was no problem and promised to give her the money. "Mira, I love you so much. I wish I had met you before my wife. Where have you been all my life?" Jaxon said. The next morning, while they were still in bed, he continued, "My wife's mother is sick, and she takes care of her every weekend while her nurse is off. But maybe weekends aren't enough. Maybe I should send her to stay with her mother for a while so I can see you more." Mira listened quietly, absorbing his words. As noon approached, she got up to prepare breakfast. They spent the rest of the weekend together, enjoying each other's company. On Sunday afternoon, Jaxon handed her some cash, and she left with a satisfied smile. When Mira arrived home, she found her children crying. "Mommy, where have you been? We are hungry," they complained. "I left you a loaf of bread. Did you not eat that?" Mira asked. "We did, but it's finished," they replied. Feeling tired, Mira gave them money to buy more bread. "I'm tired, I need to sleep," she said, retreating to her room. Her mind was filled with thoughts of Jaxon and the life she wished she had, while her children went to get more bread. The tension between her secret life and her responsibilities loomed large, creating an ever-deepening chasm in her heart. That evening, Mira returned home as usual, but something was different. Elara began questioning Jaxon, complaining about a strange smell in their bedroom and how things seemed out of place. Jaxon quickly explained that he had cleaned the house and sprayed a freshener, but Elara remained unconvinced. Suspicion gnawed at her, but she couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. The week dragged on. On Friday morning, as they prepared to leave for work, Elara frantically searched the bedroom, opening drawers and checking pockets. "I left money here for my mother's hospital bill. I need to pay today after work when I go to the village. I can't find it," she said, panic rising in her voice. "Oh, I'm sorry," Jaxon replied, looking remorseful. "I forgot to tell you. My mother called and needed money for her blood pressure medication. I used it for that." "That was not my money, Jaxon. My father gave it to me for my mother's hospital bills. You should have called me. I would have gone to Mama and given her my cash," Elara said, angry. As Jaxon explained, understanding the urgency of his mother-in-law's needs, Elara added, "I'll take money from our family savings to repay my mum, but we will be charged for early withdrawal." Frustration was evident in her tone. They left for work as usual. That evening, Mira showed up at Jaxon's house with yet another financial problem. Unable to refuse her, Jaxon transferred a significant sum of money to Mira from the family savings account. "My friend, I see you are glowing these days. What's your secret?" Jaxon's other neighbor asked, noticing her dressed up and radiant. "I found a rich man who gives me money every week. He's going to renovate my house to look like Elara's," Mira boasted loudly, her voice filled with pride. Her neighbor, however, expressed concern. "But don't neglect your kids. They are always dirty and hungry, asking for food." Mira brushed her off and left, heading to meet Jaxon. "My love, I'm tired of always coming to your house. We need to find a place for us," she said, adding that she wanted a comfortable life like Elara's and didn't want to keep asking for money. Jaxon, feeling guilty and infatuated, began setting aside an allowance for her. Meanwhile, Elara noticed that Jaxon frequently claimed to be out of money and started falling short on his responsibilities at home. His excuses about his mother's worsening health only partially appeased her, so Elara began tracking their finances. On Friday, Jaxon told Elara he was visiting his mother and agreed that Elara should take the car, since she was visiting her with the kids. That evening, Elara, while monitoring their funds, discovered a huge sum missing from their savings. Panicked, she drove to her mother-in-law's house, only to learn that Jaxon hadn't been there. Rushing back, she tried to reach Jaxon on the phone, but he didn't answer. On Saturday, a visit to the bank revealed that the missing funds had been transferred to someone named Mira. When Jaxon returned on Sunday evening, bragging about his mother's health and the produce she had, Elara couldn't contain her anger. "Stop lying, Jaxon! Where have you been?" she shouted, waving the bank statements. "Who is Mira?" Jaxon feigned ignorance, claiming the money must have been scammed from their account and that he had gone on a vacation with some friends. Elara, furious and heartbroken, knew he was lying. The tension between them escalated throughout the week. Jaxon found solace in Mira's arms. One evening, as Elara stood on the veranda, she saw Jaxon watching Mira, overcome with rage. She stormed past him and confronted Mira. "Is that my wig?" she shouted, recognizing it instantly. "What do you mean? Are you the only one who wears wigs in this village?" Mira retorted, frowning. Elara ripped the wig off Mira's head. "This is my wig. Look, this is how I cut my wigs, but I can't wear it anymore. I'm going to burn it," she declared, hiding it behind her back as Mira fought to reclaim it. "Tell me, did you steal it?" Elara demanded. Mira let go, laughing. "You don't know me well, do you?" "I am tired of your games," Elara screamed. Elara's husband intervened, separating them as the neighbors gathered to watch. "She's scaring my child," Jaxon shouted, stunning everyone into silence. Elara rushed inside, telling her kids to go to their study room. Jaxon and Mira followed her in. "What is she doing in my house? Take her away," Elara yelled. Mira stood her ground. "Calm down, he's my man and the father of my child," she said, sitting down. Jaxon, still holding Elara, said, "We need to find a solution. Mira is pregnant, and I love her." Elara, devastated, gave Jaxon an ultimatum. "You have to choose." Mira leaned closer to Jaxon, rubbing his shoulder. Jaxon then declared, "I choose Mira. She loves me and treats me with respect, but you have always been complaining. Today it's money. Tomorrow it's the smell or where I've been. I am tired, and Mira gives me peace." Holding Mira's hand, Jaxon walked out, leaving Elara in tears. "Why are we leaving and not her?" Mira complained. "You can't let her enjoy your big house." "No, my love, I can't kick her out with the kids immediately. She needs time to find a place," Jaxon explained as they walked to Mira's house. The weeks that followed were a blow to Elara. Every morning she put on a brave face and drove her children to school, appearing happy and well off to the outside world. But inside she was dying, questioning herself every day and crying herself to sleep each night. Mira, from her window, watched with a mix of envy and satisfaction, still believing that Elara's pain was not enough. "Why do you always stand by the window, my love?" Jaxon asked one evening, walking toward Mira and massaging her shoulders. "Look at her. Mira snapped, pointing at Elara's house. "You need to take that car and kick her out of the house. I can't believe you still let her enjoy my life." "Don't worry about her," Jaxon replied softly. "I only love you and will do anything for you." "If you really love me as you say you do, you would marry me," Mira demanded. "I can't have a third child out of wedlock, all with different fathers. You have to marry me, Jaxon," Mira insisted. Jaxon sighed, explaining that it was complicated because he was already married to Elara and would have to divorce her first. But Mira was relentless. She insisted he get a divorce. That week, Elara was shocked to receive divorce papers. She didn't sign them immediately, insulting her lawyers instead. One night, Mira and Jaxon barged into Elara's house, demanding she sign. "I'm still talking to my lawyers and I have conditions," Elara said firmly. Mira exploded in anger. "Oh, my sister, you want my man's money. You are so used to this big house and his cars that you don't want to leave," she taunted, as Jaxon tried to hush her. Elara laughed hysterically at Mira's outburst. "Please sign quickly so you can move out of the house," Mira said. "I want you to take what is yours and I'll take mine." Jaxon pointed at the door for them to leave, and Mira couldn't help but laugh, thinking about the luxurious life within her grasp as the future wife of the richest man in the village. She insisted Jaxon hand the divorce papers to his lawyer immediately. Weeks later, Jaxon returned home early, looking tired and sad. He found Mira packing everyone's clothes. "Why are you packing?" he asked, sinking into the dirty living room couch. "It's time to move into the big house that Elara has overstayed in," Mira replied. Jaxon sat quietly, his heart heavy. Mira moved closer, sensing something was wrong. "My love, what's happening? Don't you want to leave?" Mira asked, looking defeated. "It's not that, my love. We can't move to that house. It's not mine. It's Elara's," Jaxon explained, his voice low. "What do you mean it's not yours? You told me what's hers is yours, something about 50-50, Mira shouted, throwing down the bags in frustration. Jaxon took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Elara comes from a rich family. Her father bought the old house and demolished it to build a new one. Everything that wasn't bought with her own money is under her family's trust. Mira's eyes widened in disbelief. "I don't even understand what you're saying. And the car? What about the car?" she demanded, her voice shaking with frustration. Jaxon sighed. "The car. Her father gave it to her. It's under his name, not ours." "So we can't even keep the car?" Mira asked, her voice rising in anger. Jaxon nodded sadly. "That's right. The only thing Elara truly owns is her business, but it's in debt since she started expanding. Because we are married in community of property, I have to pay half of those debts. And it's not just that," he continued, his voice growing more somber. "I work at her father's factory. He's keeping me employed so I can pay off her debts. Half of my pension will go to her as well, which will probably be used to clear those debts." Mira's face twisted in anger and confusion. "So you're telling me you're stuck paying off her debts and we get nothing? No car? No house? Nothing?" Jaxon looked at her with weary eyes. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Her father set things up this way to protect her. The house, the car, everything. None of it is truly mine. If you hadn't rushed the divorce and allowed her to let me have what's mine, I would have kept my pension and still found a job elsewhere." Mira felt a surge of panic as her dreams of a luxurious life crumbled before her eyes. "So you are poor, Jaxon. You are a poor man," she screamed repeatedly, the reality sinking in. "What am I going to do?" she cried, pacing back and forth. "I left my job for this." Overwhelmed, she retreated to her tiny bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Through the walls, Jaxon could hear her sobbing. "I used a charm on a poor man," Mira thought to herself. "I don't even love him. What am I going to do?" That night, Mira locked herself in her room, leaving Jaxon to share the other room with the children. The days that followed were filled with tension. Mira's resentment for Jaxon grew stronger with each passing moment. The care and affection she once showed were gone. She ordered him around, making him do all the chores, treating him like a servant. Everyone in the village soon knew that Jaxon was now the woman in Mira's house, yet desperately in love, he continued to do whatever she asked, still hoping to make things right. When Jaxon's family heard about his demeaning living conditions, they decided to intervene. Arriving at Mira's house, they were shocked to find Jaxon kneeling on the floor, mopping. They confronted Mira and demanded that Jaxon come with them. Reluctantly, Mira agreed. Back at his family home, they celebrated Jaxon's return with drinks, but after his first sip, he started vomiting. Slowly, the fog in his mind lifted, and he began to remember everything clearly. Realizing the extent of Mira's manipulation, he decided to retrieve his belongings from her house. Filled with rage, he stormed into Mira's house, grabbing her by the neck and pinning her against the wall. "What did you do to me?" he demanded, his voice trembling with fury. Mira, gasping for breath, confessed, "I used a charm on you. That night I came to your house, I fed you a love potion so you would see only me." Jaxon's rage intensified. "You demon! You made me lose my good woman and family," he cried. "I will finish you today." Alerted by the commotion, Mira's neighbor rushed in and pulled Jaxon away. "It's not worth going to jail for," she screamed, struggling to pull Jaxon away. "Think of your kids." Jaxon let go, leaving Mira collapsed on the floor, sobbing. He gathered his few belongings and left. The neighbor took care of Mira, trying to ease her pain with a warm cloth. "Mira, let me take you to the clinic to check if the baby is okay," the neighbor suggested, but Mira only cried silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I thought I had it all. I regret everything. I envied Elara's life so much that I ruined mine. What will I do with 3 children and no job?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The neighbor tried to console her, promising to help her find a job, but Mira continued to cry. Jaxon went to apologize, but his words could not mend the broken family. Though he was allowed to visit his children, the rift remained. Mira also tried to apologize to Elara, who showed little interest. Elara had moved on with her life, opening another business and finding peace once more. The scars of the past lingered, but she had learned to live again, stronger and wiser than before. The end.